when nurse Emma Chen loses her job and faces crushing medical bills for her sick foster sister. A mysterious woman offers her an impossible opportunity. Care for a comatose billionaire for $15,000 a month?
Ow!
But what starts as a desperate financial arrangement quickly becomes a deadly game of survival. Hello, beautiful souls. Tonight's story will take you on a journey where hearts are tested and destinies collide. So, let's begin this tale together. The fluorescent lights of St. Catherine's Hospital buzzed overhead as Emma Chen clutched the termination letter, her hands trembling like autumn leaves. 3 years of saving lives in pediatrics, erased by budget cuts? The white paper felt heavier than her mounting debts as rain pelted the windows with relentless fury. Rent's due in 3 days. Lucy's text burned across her phone screen. Emma's foster sister was fighting leukemia, and Emma's salary had been their lifeline. Now that lifeline was severed. Walking through the hospital corridors one final time, Emma's eyes traced the stark divide between the charity ward and the luxury wing. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows on marble floors, while fresh orchids perfumed the air with their intoxicating sweetness. Emma Chen. The voice belonged to Diana Montenegro, a woman whose Chanel suit whispered wealth and whose cold blue eyes held secrets. Her silver hair was pulled into a perfect chignon, and diamonds glittered on her fingers like captured starlight. I've heard remarkable things about your dedication from Dr. Webb. Diana's smile was practiced, predatory. I have a proposition that might interest you. They sat in the hospital cafe overlooking the city's glittering sprawl. Diana ordered champagne-priced cappuccino while Emma nursed free water, counting every dollar in her empty wallet. My brother Gabriel was in a devastating accident 6 weeks ago, Diana began, her voice carrying just enough grief to sound genuine. He's been in a coma since. The doctors say his condition is stable, but there's no telling when he'll wake up. Emma listened as Diana painted the picture of Gabriel Montenegro, a tech billionaire whose empire crumbled while he lay unconscious. The car accident on FDR Drive had left him with severe brain trauma, now residing in the hospital's most exclusive suite. I need someone special to care for him. Someone with real compassion. Diana leaned forward, her eyes glinting. The position. Pays $15,000 a month, full benefits, luxury accommodations included. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. The salary was double her nursing income, enough to save Lucy and give them both a future. What exactly would I be doing? Emma managed, fighting to keep her voice steady. Diana's smile widened, revealing perfect white teeth. Simply be there with him 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Monitor his condition, ensure proper care, and keep him company. Gabriel was so vibrant before the accident. Something flickered in Diana's expression, gone too quickly to identify. I believe having someone there might stimulate his recovery, Diana continued. Someone who truly cares. The next morning, Emma moved into accommodations that belonged in a fairy tale. Egyptian cotton sheets, marble bathroom, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. But when Diana led her to Gabriel's room, Emma's breath caught. Room 1247 was a palace disguised as medical facility. Artwork adorned silk-covered walls. Fresh lilies filled crystal vases, and elegant furniture created an atmosphere of serene luxury. Medical equipment hummed softly in the background, monitoring the life of the man at the center of it all. Gabriel Montenegro lay motionless, dark hair grown longer during his weeks of unconsciousness, giving him an almost romantic appearance. Even pale and still, his aristocratic features retained the magnetism that had once graced magazine covers. Emma approached his bedside, studying the peaceful expression that masked whatever battles raged in his sleeping mind. The monitors showed steady vitals, proof that his body fought to survive while his consciousness remained imprisoned. The doctors say he can't hear anything, Diana said from behind her. But Emma caught the uncertainty threading through her words. Still, I prefer having someone here at all times. Diana's voice dropped to almost a whisper. You never know what secrets a sleeping mind might reveal. 3 weeks into her vigil, Emma had established rituals that gave meaning to the endless hours. Each morning at 7, she relieved the night nurse, checking Gabriel's charts with the precision that had made her exceptional in pediatrics. Dr. Harrison Webb, distinguished neurologist, explained Gabriel's condition in terms that both comforted and terrified her. Coma patients are puzzles wrapped in mysteries, Dr. Webb told her during their morning consultation. Some wake after days, others after years. Some never wake at all. Gabriel's scans show activity, but consciousness remains elusive. At first, Emma spoke to Gabriel only about medical procedures and daily care. But as days melted into routine, she began sharing pieces of herself she had never given anyone. "I grew up in foster care in Queens," she whispered while adjusting his pillows, her fingers brushing against his surprisingly warm skin. 8 kids, never enough love to go around. "I used to dream about having someone who would really listen, who would care about my words." The irony cut deep. She had found her perfect listener in someone who couldn't respond. Yet Gabriel's presence filled the emptiness that had haunted her since childhood. After a month, Emma began noticing changes the medical staff missed. When she played Chopin softly, his breathing became deeper, more rhythmic. When she read business journals aloud, his heart rate showed subtle fluctuations on the monitors. Most remarkably, his facial expressions seemed to shift in response to her voice. Happy stories brought a softening to his features. Sadder topics created tension around his eyes, as if some part of him remained aware, listening from the depths of his unconscious prison. Diana visited 3 times weekly, always accompanied by her nervous husband Roberto, whose attention remained glued to his phone rather than his brother-in-law's condition. Their conversations focused on stock prices and board meetings. Treating Gabriel like expensive medical equipment rather than a human being fighting for his life. The doctors recommend long-term care facilities, Roberto mentioned during one visit, his voice devoid of emotion. "The costs here are becoming unsustainable." Emma felt ice form in her veins. She had worked in enough hospitals to know that long-term care meant warehousing patients with minimal attention. "Gabriel's insurance covers most expenses," Emma interjected carefully. Diana's eyes flashed with something dangerous before her. Practiced smile returned. "Of course, dear Emma, we want what's best for Gabriel." But Emma caught the look that passed between Diana and Roberto, a silent communication that made her skin crawl. That evening, as golden sunset painted Gabriel's room in warm hues, Emma found herself speaking more intimately than ever before. "I know this sounds insane, but I feel like you understand me better than anyone ever has, even though you can't respond. Sometimes I sense you're really listening, that somehow you care what happens to me." As if responding to her vulnerability, Gabriel's eyelids fluttered. The movement was so brief, Emma questioned her sanity, but the monitors showed a spike in brain activity that made her pulse race. She leaned closer, studying his face with desperate intensity. "Gabriel, can you hear me?" Lying motionless. For weeks, twitched almost imperceptibly. Emma grasped it without thinking, her warm fingers intertwining with his cool ones. "If you can hear me, squeeze my hand." For heartbeats that felt like eternities, nothing happened. Then, so gently she might have imagined it, Gabriel's fingers pressed against hers.
Eyes.
Emma's gasp echoed through the room, as tears she hadn't realized were falling splashed onto their joined hands. But as she looked up in wonder, she saw Diana standing in the doorway, her face twisted with an expression of pure rage. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Diana's voice cut through the air, like a blade. "I was checking his reflexes," Emma said, fighting to keep her voice steady as Diana's cold stare pinned her in place. "I thought I felt a response." Diana moved into the room with predatory grace, her heels clicking against the marble floor, like a countdown. Gabriel has shown no neurological improvement since the accident. The doctors have been quite clear about his prognosis, but his hand moved. "I felt it." Emma's grip on Gabriel's fingers tightened protectively. "You felt what you wanted to feel." Diana's smile was razor-sharp. "Grief and hope can play cruel tricks on the mind, I should know." But Emma caught the flicker of panic in Diana's eyes before the mask slipped back into place. Something was wrong here, something beyond a sister's concern for her comatose brother. The next morning, Emma arrived early to find Dr. Webb reviewing Gabriel's latest scans with unusual intensity. His weathered face was creased with confusion, As he studied the images, "Is everything all right?" Emma asked. Dr. Webb glanced up, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Gabriel's brain activity has increased significantly over the past month. It's quite remarkable, actually. Patients in his condition rarely show this kind of neurological improvement." Emma's heart raced. What does it mean? It could mean he's beginning to emerge from the coma, or it could mean nothing at all. Brain is still largely a mystery to us. Dr. Webb closed the file. "I've recommended increasing his physical therapy and stimulation protocols." After Dr. Webb left, Emma sat beside Gabriel's bed, studying his peaceful face with new hope blooming. In her chest, "I know you're in there," she whispered. "I know you can hear me." This time, when she took his hand, the response was unmistakable. His fingers curled around hers with deliberate pressure, and his eyelids fluttered more visibly. Emma's breath caught as Gabriel's lips parted slightly, and the faintest whisper escaped. "Help!" The word was barely audible, but Emma heard it clearly. She leaned closer, her pulse thundering in her ears. "Gabriel, what do you need help with?" His eyes remained closed, but his grip on her hand tightened with desperate strength. "Diana," he breathed, the word carrying a weight of terror that made Emma's blood freeze. "Not accident." Before Emma could process the implications, footsteps echoed in the hallway. She quickly released Gabriel's hand and stepped back as Diana entered with Roberto and a man Emma didn't recognize. "Emma, I'd like you to meet Mr. Harrison," Diana said smoothly. "He's from the long-term care facility we discussed." The stranger was thin and pale with calculating eyes that assessed Gabriel like a piece of inventory. "Beautiful setup here, but quite expensive to maintain indefinitely. Our facility can provide excellent care at a fraction of the cost." Emma watched in horror as they discussed Gabriel's future as if he were already dead. But now she knew the truth. Gabriel was aware, trapped in his own body, trying to communicate something vital about his condition. "When would the transfer happen?" Roberto asked. "Early as next week," Mr. Harrison replied. "We have an opening in our long-term ward." Emma's mind raced. If Gabriel was moved to a lesser facility, he might never recover fully. Worse, if his accident wasn't actually an accident, he could be in real danger. That night, Emma stayed past her shift, waiting until the hospital was quiet. She sat beside Gabriel's bed, speaking in urgent whispers. "Gabriel, if you can hear me, I need you to tell me what happened. Was Diana involved in your accident?" His eyelids fluttered, and with tremendous effort, he managed to open them slightly. His dark eyes, though unfocused, seemed to find hers with desperate intensity. "Brakes," he whispered so softly she had to lean close to catch the word. "Cut." Emma's world tilted on its axis. Gabriel's accident wasn't an accident at all. What? Was attempted murder? She tried to kill you? Emma breathed. Gabriel's barely perceptible nod confirmed her worst fears. Then his eyes widened with panic as they focused on something behind her. Emma spun around to find Diana standing in the doorway, but this time her mask of concern had completely fallen away. Her face was twisted with cold fury, and in her hand was a syringe filled with clear liquid. "I was hoping it wouldn't come to this," Diana said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her with a soft click that sounded like a death sentence. "You should have left well enough alone, Emma." Diana's voice was silk wrapped around steel as she advanced with the syringe. Gabriel was never supposed to wake up. Emma positioned herself between Diana and Gabriel's bed, her nursing training kicking in as she assessed escape routes and potential weapons. The call button was too far away and Diana blocked the only exit. "You tried to kill your own brother?" Emma's voice cracked with disbelief. Diana laughed, the sound sharp and brittle in the sterile air. "Half-brother. And he's been a thorn in my side since the day my father acknowledged him. 40% of the Montenegro fortune was supposed to be mine, not split with some bastard. Child." Behind Emma, Gabriel's breathing became labored, his machines beeping faster as his body responded to the stress despite his semi-conscious state. "The car accident was just the beginning," Diana continued, circling slowly like a predator. "Gabriel was supposed to die that night, but the paramedics were too efficient. So I had to get creative." Emma's mind raced through the past months. Seeing Diana's visits in a new light, you've been poisoning him. That's why he's not waking up fully. Small doses of paralytic agents in his IV. Nothing the doctors would detect in routine tests, but enough to keep him trapped in his own body. Diana's smile was poisonous. I needed time to secure control of the company, to make sure the board understood that Gabriel's condition was permanent. But he's been getting stronger, fighting back. Yes, thanks to your interference. You've been diluting the dosage by staying so close, making the staff more attentive. Diana raised the syringe. This dose will finish what I started. A tragic setback in his condition, and you, poor dear, will be blamed for emotional instability and poor care. Emma's hand inched toward the water pitcher on Gabriel's bedside table. You won't get away with this. Dr. Webb suspects something. The improved brain activity, the unexplained complications. Dr. Webb is old and sentimental. He'll accept my explanation that Gabriel simply couldn't overcome his injuries. Diana stepped closer. And you'll be found tomorrow morning, having suffered a tragic breakdown and overdosed on hospital medications. A foster child with no family, no one to ask questions. The casual cruelty in Diana's voice ignited something fierce in Emma's chest. She had survived foster care, poverty, and countless rejections. She would not die in this room, and neither would Gabriel. You made one mistake, Emma said, her voice steady, despite the terror coursing through her veins. And what's that? You assumed I was alone in this world. Emma lunged for the water pitcher and hurled it at Diana's head. Diana ducked, but the distraction gave Emma the split second she needed to slam her hand on the emergency call button. Diana recovered quickly, grabbing Emma's arm and raising the syringe toward her neck. But Emma had spent years handling combative patients in desperate situations. She twisted free and shoved Diana backward, sending her crashing into the equipment. Cart. The syringe flew across the room and shattered against the marble floor. You little nobody, Diana snarled, pulling herself up with blood trickling from her forehead. Do you think anyone will believe your word against mine? I'm Diana. Montenegro, you're a failed foster child playing nurse. Maybe not, Emma said, backing toward Gabriel's bed. But they'll believe the recording. Diana's face went white as Emma held up her phone, the red recording light still blinking. I started recording the moment you walked in with that syringe. Every word you said about the poisoning, the attempted murder, everything. The room filled with the sound of running footsteps as security and medical staff responded to the emergency call. Diana's mask of civility crumbled completely, revealing the desperate killer beneath. You have no idea what you've done, Diana. Hissed. The Montenegro family has power you can't imagine. We'll destroy you, and it's a good thing I'm not facing you alone. Emma turned to Gabriel's bed, where his eyes were now fully open, dark and intense with awareness. His hand reached out shakily and she grasped it as hospital security burst through the door. Gabriel, Dr. Webb breathed, pushing past the security guards to reach his patient. Can you speak? Gabriel's voice was hoarse, but clear as crystal. When he looked directly at Diana, she poisoned me, cut my brake lines, tried to kill me for the inheritance. Diana's face contorted with rage as security moved to restrain her. You can't prove anything. It's his word against mine, and he's been in a coma for months. Emma held up her phone with a steady hand. Actually, it's your confession against silence, and I have it all recorded. Diana was led away in handcuffs, screaming threats and denials. Emma felt Gabriel squeeze her hand with surprising strength. Thank you, he whispered. You saved my life. But Emma's relief was short-lived. Through the window, she saw Roberto Montenegro stepping out of a black sedan, his face grim with determination. Behind him were two men in expensive suits whose eyes held the cold promise of violence. Diana might be in custody, but the Montenegro family's reach extended far beyond one woman's ambitions. Gabriel's recovery over the next week was nothing short of miraculous. Without the constant influx of paralytic agents, his body began healing at an accelerated pace. Physical therapy sessions revealed that his motor functions were largely intact, and his mind was as sharp as ever. But Emma could see the storm building beyond the hospital walls. They won't let this stand, Gabriel told her during one of their private moments. He was sitting up in bed now. Color returned to his cheeks, but his eyes held a darkness that spoke of battles yet to come. Diana may be in jail, but Roberto controls the family's connections. Politicians, judges, law enforcement. Emma sat beside him, her hand intertwined with his in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Recording is solid evidence. Evidence can disappear. Witnesses can be discredited or silenced. Gabriel's grip tightened. You don't understand how deep this goes, Emma. The Montenegro name opens doors and closes them. Roberto won't risk me testifying about the family's involvement in attempted murder. As if summoned by their conversation, Dr. Webb entered with an expression of grave concern. Gabriel, there's been a development. The district attorney's office is questioning the validity of Emma's recording. They're claiming it was obtained illegally and may not be admissible in court. Emma's blood ran cold, but Diana confessed everything. Roberto Montenegro has hired the best legal team money can buy. They're arguing that Emma coerced the confession while Diana was under emotional distress. Dr. Webb shook his head. Also been informed that Emma's employment here is being terminated, effective immediately. On what grounds? Gabriel demanded. Alleged misconduct in patient care. Anonymous complaints about boundary violations and unprofessional behavior. Emma saw the trap closing around her with crystalline clarity. Roberto was systematically dismantling her credibility while positioning to silence her permanently. That night, as she packed her few belongings from the guest suite, Gabriel found her with tears streaming down her face. This is my fault, she whispered. I should have just been a good little nurse and minded my own business. Now Lucy's medical bills are piling up again. I have no job. They're going to bury the truth so deep it'll never see daylight. Gabriel pulled her into his arms, and for a moment, Emma allowed herself to believe they could face anything together. His embrace felt like coming home after years of wandering. There's a way out, Gabriel said softly. For both of us. Emma pulled back to look at his face, seeing something new in his expression. Hope mixed with determination, and something that looked like love. I've been thinking about this for days. It's the only way to protect you and ensure Roberto can't touch either of us as if we're legally bound together. Gabriel's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. Marry me, Emma. The words hit her like lightning. Gabriel, that's insane. You're not thinking clearly. I've never been more clear about anything in my life. He cupped her face in his hands. As my wife, you'd have legal protections. You couldn't be compelled to testify against me, and vice versa. More importantly, you'd have access to the Montenegro fortune to fight back. Emma's mind reeled. That's not how marriage is supposed to work. It should be about love, not legal strategy. Gabriel's eyes softened. Who says it can't be both? Before she could respond, he continued, I've been in love with you since the day you first held my hand and told me about growing up in Queens. I may have been unconscious, but my heart was. Listening to every word. You saved my life in more ways than one. Emma felt her world shifting on its axis. Gabriel, I care about you more than I've ever cared about anyone. But marrying for protection feels wrong, like I'm using you. Be saving me just as much as I'd be saving you. Without you, I'd still be trapped in that bed, slowly being poisoned to death. We're stronger together than apart. The next morning brought devastating news. Lucy had been rushed to the emergency room during the night, her condition deteriorating rapidly. Emma sat beside her foster sister's bed, watching the monitors that had become too familiar, when Gabriel appeared in the doorway. He was dressed in his first real clothes since the accident, leaning heavily on a walking cane, but moving under his own power. In his hand was a small velvet box. Lucy needs immediate treatment that her insurance won't cover, Gabriel said without preamble. The experimental therapy could save her life, but it costs more than most people make in a year. Emma's throat tightened. Gabriel, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering, marry me today, and Lucy gets the treatment tonight. We face Roberto and his lawyers together, with equal power and resources. Emma looked at Lucy's pale face, then at Gabriel's determined expression, and finally, at her own reflection in the hospital window. She saw a woman who had spent her life fighting to protect the people she loved. This isn't how I dreamed my wedding would go, she said with a shaky smile. Gabriel limped closer and took her hand. Dreams can be rebuilt. Lives can't always be saved. The ceremony was simple, conducted by a hospital chaplain in Lucy's room with Dr. Webb as their witness. Emma wore her nursing scrubs. Gabriel wore a borrowed suit that hung loose on his still-recovering frame, and their rings were simple bands from the hospital gift shop. But when Gabriel kissed her as his wife, Emma felt something shift between them that had nothing to do with legal protection or financial security. It felt like coming home. 2 hours later, Gabriel Montenegro arrived with his legal team in a court order to have Gabriel declared mentally incompetent due to his recent coma. They were met in the hospital lobby by Mr. and Mrs. Gabriel Montenegro, flanked by their own legal representatives and armed with documentation of Diana's confession, medical records proving the poisoning, and a marriage certificate that made Emma untouchable. "Hello, Roberto," Gabriel said, his voice carrying new authority. "I believe you and I need to have a conversation about Diana's inheritance." Roberto's face went ashen as he realized that everything had changed. Emma was no longer a vulnerable nurse who could be silenced. She was a Montenegro wife with access to billions in resources and the law on her side. As they walked toward their new life together, Emma felt Gabriel's hand squeeze hers with gentle strength. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. Emma looked back at Lucy's room, where the experimental treatment was already beginning, then at the man who had become her husband, partner, and unexpected salvation. "Just one," she said, smiling through tears of relief and joy. "I wish I'd met you when you were awake." Gabriel laughed, the sound rich and full of promise. "We have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." Behind them, Roberto Montenegro watched his family's empire slip from his grasp as the woman he'd underestimated walked away with everything he'd tried to steal. The end.